One issue, 2 points of view. Agora.
Improving air transport. What to do about it? Europarliamentarians Isabelle Durant and Dominique Baudis, Belgian Green on the one hand and French centre-right on the other, go head-to-head on a key matter coming up for close attention this autumn. Taking a flight these days can be a test for any traveller. Throw in an erupting volcano and all bets are off for predictability. Jammed airports wreck plans.
Ça m'inspire quand même une image de dépendance. Enfin, je pense que
it looks like dependence to me. Air transport has become extremely dependent. We're very dependent on it. This volcanic eruption we had, or snow, various situations, sometimes strikes, put thousands of passengers in difficulty. We, citizens, member states, the European Union, are terribly dependent on aviation. It's reached a point where the slightest problem, the smallest interruption, leads to the scenes we see in airports, and also blocks economic activity, goods which are not delivered. When this goes on for days or weeks on end, the economic chaos and cost is enormous. So I really wonder about our dependence on air transport, which ought to remain a mode of transport used for long distance, because that's what it's best for. It shouldn't be something we use day after day. Therefore, I think we must review our entire transportation system.
Nous sommes dans une société de mobilité et d'ouverture sur le monde.
Our society is one of mobility, open to the world. And so, yes, we depend a great deal on transport. But the dysfunctioning we sometimes see in aviation can also happen in other modes of transport. I'd like us to measure the importance of Europe's aeronautic industrial sector. It's 500,000 jobs. 500,000 people in a lot of European countries work in the sector. It's a strong part of the European Union's income. 3/4 of Europe's aeronautical industrial production is exported. It's also an area that invests a lot in research. 20% of its workforce is involved in research. So I agree with you. We have to try to limit dysfunction as much as possible. And just as much limit the consumption of jet fuel.
I'm not denying the industrial interest of both research and civil aviation, but obviously I question that in the end we become over-dependent and the costs add up. Because who pays for aviation? Everybody, in fact, and that includes the people who don't use it. There are environmental costs, noise, competition between regional airports that leads to moving jobs here and there because everyone wants to have an airport nearby, especially in the European Union. Moving freight by air doesn't make much sense. Why should goods such as DVD players go by plane? We should also ask ourselves about the transportation of food. Do we need fruit and vegetables from the other end of the world to come by plane? With all due respect for a very important and useful industry, which is a vanguard of technology, and that's a good thing, it still has to be reviewed to see the cost-effectiveness of aviation. We don't know that, or at least we're not saying it.
I agree about transport over several hundred kilometers, and we see that where a region has high-speed train service, the number of plane trips drops considerably. For instance, between Paris and Lyon in France, or Paris and Bordeaux, or Brussels and Paris. In that case, we don't take the plane. 15 years ago we did. Today we take the train. But on the other hand, when it's more than 1,000 kilometers, we depend on air transport. We can't go from a society of mobility to a stationary one and just stop moving around. That also goes for
No, but we can imagine, for instance, and this also goes for short distances, but mostly for long distance, putting considerably more money into developing video conferencing. A lot of things could be done without actually going. That would be a considerable gain. If we improve the European single sky, which I also want to do, better air traffic, better organised, lowering costs. But I'm really afraid that since nature abhors a vacuum, wherever we gain in the way the system operates, we'll proportionally increase the number of companies that use planes in this space.
Le nombre de compagnies qui vont exploiter des avions dans ces espaces.
Il y a des réponses que l'Europe peut apporter.
Europe can supply answers that will save time and a lot of energy. It's what we call the single European sky. Our situation is quite extravagant. Much to the EU member states' satisfaction, Europe produces planes and satellites. We have a policy for aeronautics, a space policy, and at the same time we don't have a single European sky. Each country has its own airspace, which it regulates in its own way. This leads to consequences when we have a crisis like the volcanic eruption. Each country took decisions without coordinating, without synchronizing. One country opened up its airspace when its neighbor hadn't yet done so. The volcano affair showed that we have to now speed up the process of creating a single European sky. Not simply to manage crises like the volcano one, but all in all to manage the traffic.
Exactement.
Single European Sky Air Traffic Management Research, or CESAR for short, is a programme to revolutionise traffic control in 2013 with satellites. The aim is to save 10% of fuel consumption on every flight and shorten time in the air.
I can see very well the interest of a single European sky, and I believe we have to do it, and that we in the European Parliament have to put on pressure to get it done. I'm completely with you there. This said, if we can develop CESAR as a tool to improve traffic operations, great. On top of this, it's European cutting-edge, beautiful research. It's got my support. But once we've done that, I'm afraid that what we gain from it, the 10% saving through better traffic management, will immediately be filled in, so to speak, by reduced tax revenues, incentives given by regional airports, low-cost airlines that will immediately step in. The extra space we get, or CO2 reductions through better traffic management, will immediately be lost.
There are 4 points that seem essential to me. One thing is to keep a major European industrial sector going, aerospace. It's one of Europe's great technological successes. Do things so air transport goes on being affordable to the biggest number of people. Save on energy, increase safety. Save time by being able to move in a single European sky in which planes, from the time they leave the ground, are not directed country by country. And I believe that on that subject we can understand one another. And lastly, assign very ambitious objectives to the plane makers and airlines in terms of reducing consumption. In the last 50 years, fuel use has been cut back by 70%. We ought to cut down what we use today by 30 or 40% in the next 20 years. These seem to me to be the achievable goals and necessary from the point of view of Europe's general interest.